This is a conversation with Tom Crash Test Tommy Dowdall, a black belt out of Canada. He's a mental health crisis counselor with over 30 years of experience. He's also fostered over 50 children and currently teaches Jiu-Jitsu on the side, travels, and teaches seminars focused on the mental health side of Jiu-Jitsu. He also sells a jerk chicken sauce that's available for order if you live in Canada. I hope you enjoy our chat.
I wanted to ask you right off the bat, as somebody who has taken a very unorthodox route to get to the black belt,
Yes.
can you tell me a little bit about your journey of getting to be a black belt?
Yeah, I mean, it started, I guess, about especially for jiu-jitsu, and about 30 years ago. The route to jiu-jitsu black belt started with other martial arts, and it started with, like a lot of people, with movies, Bruce Lee, Jackie Chan, that kind of stuff, that kind of interest.
Does that mean you started in like Winjo, or you went right to you went to something else, Taekwondo?
You got it, Taekwondo.
Yeah,
Taekwondo
me
was
too.
my first art that I took. And so took that for quite a few years, then took a couple of years off. Then I was looking to start again. So I found a Taekwondo club, and it was actually a Hapkido club. And they're running the Hapkido in the basement. And so we walked through the basement, and there was kind of a main floor, and they were doing something in the main floor. People were like rolling around on the ground, and so one day when I went in, I said, what are these guys doing? And of course it was some early days jiu-jitsu. So I just kind of joined that, and the guy said,
Roughly
well,
when was this? Just ballpark, what year?
so this would have been, let's see, about 94.
Oh, so this was real early days jiu-jitsu in North America.
Oh yeah. This was very early on. So one of the instructors there, his name was Terry Riggs. He said, if you like this, because this was in Toronto, it was kind of Upper Beaches area in Toronto, and he said, if you like this, you should come check out our club in North York. Yeah. So I didn't realize that there was another club, so I kind of drove up there, and it was a very impressive facility. They had 10 different martial arts going on with 10 separate instructors. It was one of those facilities that I kind of walked in and said, I'm not sure what's going on here, but I want to be a part of this. So, and that was called the Samurai Club. So that was probably one of the early clubs, teaching it in Toronto. And so I kind of joined up there, started there in the early days, and that started the journey.
So that was about 30 years ago at this point.
Absolutely.
What was the thing that kind of kept you going? That's a very long journey to take in any individual martial art.
Yeah, it is. And I'm not sure. I mean, it might be something that's just um, built in me, because by all rights, I should have quit. I mean, I was older than most when I started. I wasn't very good. I wasn't flexible. I didn't seem to be learning things. And there were, people that were coming in. I'd been training for a couple of years. People had been coming in, in a week or two, and they're getting this stuff, and I just didn't seem to get it. But it was fascinating. It kind of reminded me of in school, of math. I enjoyed math. I was terrible at it, but I found it interesting. So I don't know. It's can't really explain it, but just kind of stuck with it, and found it interesting and fascinating, and started to notice some patterns, and of some things that I was doing, some things that other people were doing, some patterns that worked, some patterns that didn't. So that just kind of fascinated me.
Did you find that like the way you were learning was a little bit different than the way other people were learning? Like, is that why you kind of focused on the patterns?
Yeah, I didn't sort of worry myself too much with what other people were doing. Uh, we can only start from where we are, because we're all being shown the same technique, but I wasn't really getting it. So it was just the patterns. It made sense to me, which I found was interesting, because in some things I was finding new pathways through these patterns. But in others, I was getting stuck in the same position over and over and over again. It's like, surely I can recognize that I'm getting stuck. Why can't I recognize the step before I'm getting stuck so that I don't get stuck? So
Can
it
you give
was
an
just
example of like one or two of these patterns that you found?
sure. Well, the biggest one that I found was, and it's said quite often, is the pattern of connection. So the way that I describe it to people is that I like to say I grapple like I'm an octopus with separation anxiety, so that wherever you go, I go and gravity goes. So often when there's a connection, people are afraid or concerned about the pressure. So when the pressure comes off, people kind of go, oh, well, thank God the pressure's off because I didn't want that. For me, pressure is my friend. It's the thing that tells me that I have to tap, or it tells me it tells me that you don't have it. You might be 99% of the way there as to where you want it to go, but you needed that extra 1%, which means if you can't come forward and blast through my defense or whatever I was trying to do, I know the pressure has to come off. You have to go up, down, left, right, backwards. You have to do something else. So I would just stay in that position and monitor that pressure. And then it's actually not the pressure, it's the absence of pressure. So once that pressure comes off, that's my transition point. That tells me exactly when you're moving to your next position. So I don't need to learn 1,000 techniques. I just have to close my eyes and I feel the pressure. And then this is, again, I have a lot of weird concepts, but in my head, I call it the Dumb and Dumber. So in the movie, and he's trying to pick up the girl, and he's like, so like, what are my chances? Like 1 in 100, and she's kind of like, yeah, like no, like 1 in a million kind of thing. And he's like, so you're telling me there's a chance?
Yeah.
And that's exactly what I go to in my mind when I put up a defense. Somebody like tries to blast through it. They push, they push, they push. I'm just monitoring the pressure, the connection. And in my mind, I'm saying, so you're telling me there's a chance. Because if you could tap me out from that position without moving or making any adjustments, I know you would. If that, I don't know if that makes sense or
Yeah,
not.
it does. No, I'm following.
Yeah. So that's one of the things that I found. You're asking about patterns. So that was just the pattern recognition and some awareness of some of those things. Yeah.
So you kind of like use these things to help you just continue to grow in the sport because the moves weren't coming as naturally to you. And that's sort of what kept you going, is like looking for these patterns. Like that was your path forward.
Yeah, that helped me stay in the game a little bit longer. And for me, it was if I went to a class and we were rolling, and you were the guy that was always arm barring me, always triangling me. It didn't matter what I did. In my mind, what I would think is, okay, but this time it took you 7 seconds to tap me out instead of 3. So I'm making progress. And then the gaps got bigger, the frequency and duration and intensity, lessened. And part of that recognition comes from working in the field of mental health, working with clients and individuals, where once we develop a program to make some changes or adjustments, things often get worse before they get better for that client, because we're making a change to their routine, their patterns, and their behaviors. They don't like that. It doesn't feel comfortable. Doesn't mean they're angry with the changes. It's just not comfortable. So there's a reaction rather than a response. But then it doesn't mean we change the program and say, oh my God, that didn't work. It's like, no, that's actually evidence that there is some change. And then the client eventually becomes comfortable, and then they make the adjustments. So it was the same kind of thing that I like to apply to this. So bringing the mental side of it into the physical.
Did you take this lesson from Jiu-Jitsu and apply it to your kind of life as a counselor, or did you take your learnings from a counselor, from being a mental health counselor and crisis counselor, and say, you know what, some of these might work in Jiu-Jitsu?
Well, I've done both. Yeah, no, it's a great point. Like the crossovers are the same. So once there's a concept that works in jiu-jitsu, if someone doesn't know jiu-jitsu and I'm working with them in the mental health field, that concept is the same. And vice versa. If there's a concept that I found that worked in mental health, then I can apply that in some aspects in jiu-jitsu as well.
Is there a particular concept that you're surprised that you were able to take from mental health and apply on the mat? Or, that you weren't quite expecting to be as functional or useful as it was?
Yeah, I think one of the early ones, I don't remember where I heard this, but I heard it in the mental health field. It was very early on in my training. And somebody had said to me, in any situation, especially with some of the clients I'm working with in mental health, it's crisis based. But in any situation, it's never about you. So it didn't make sense early on when I was younger. Okay, yeah, I know it's not about me, but I'm there. I'm dealing with a client. They're angry. They're getting escalated. But it started to make sense. If you came to my work and clients hadn't met you and they asked you a question and you said no, you would get the same response I would get. They haven't met you. They don't know you. They don't have a basis in history to like or not like you. But that is their trigger, the word no. So often what would happen, especially with some of the newer staff who are still learning, they would go in with a client. They would be given the answer no. That would be their trigger. The client would escalate, maybe start yelling, swearing, calling the staff names. Then the staff would escalate. Well, you can't call me this. You can't say that. It's like, well, they can say that. It maybe not be the best approach, but they can. And it's whether we respond or we react. So when you realize it's not about you, it doesn't matter what you've said. You're going to get the same reaction that somebody else would. So how does that help? It helps remove you from the scenario. So it's not personalized. Once it's not personalized, you can start to, first of all, like validate what the client is going through, because that's the issue. They're upset about something. So I have to find out, what is it that you're angry about? I could tell the client you can't yell and swear at me, or I can say, hey, it sounds like you're having a rough day. Like, tell me what's going on. That allows them to tell their perspective, which means we're having a conversation rather than an argument. And that is, I say that all the time in coaching, that I feel like our jiu-jitsu should feel like a conversation and not an argument. We're grappling. You're trying to do something. I can try to argue with that with force and not listen to what you're trying to do and, your moves, your pressure, your connection. But if I don't listen to what it is you're trying to do, I'm only putting my point forward. You're trying to do a move. I'm trying to counter it. I have to listen to what it is that you're saying. And that's where the awareness of the connection and the pressure comes in. And I find the answers to a lot of the counters are in the listening rather than you're grabbing and I'm grabbing, you're going to give me this. And I'm like, no, give me this. You grab me and you grab me and I'm like, oh, so you want the hand. Do you want it over here? And you're like, no, I'd rather have it over here. So, okay, so we're both going over here. You're like, no, I want to go over here, but I want you over there. It's like, it just becomes a little bit more frustrating, but I'm listening to what it is that you're saying rather than just, I know what I think. And if what I thought worked, we wouldn't be in this situation. So what I thought didn't work because you had a counterpoint to my argument. So I have to listen to what that is. And that's the crossover. So the lesson is it can be brought both either way, on the mat, off the mat, from mental health to the mat, from the mat to mental health.
Let's talk a little bit more about crisis counseling, because that's a pretty intense job to have. And, tell me a little bit about what your day is as a crisis counselor for starters.
Well, a lot of the clients that I work with, they've got various, mental health afflictions. There's concurrent disorders as well. There's also, so some might have a disability, addictions, acquired brain injury, either separately or all together. All of the individuals that I support would live on their own. And as a case manager, we're responsible for essentially everything. So every day looks different. We can go in and have the greatest day, and we can go into the clients and they're infested with bed bugs and cockroaches, and they've got cancer treatments that need to be done, and there's a lot of things that are going on. So we administer medications, which means there's a lot of follow-up for doctor's appointments and making sure things are effective and efficient. So it varies. We can be dealing with medical, legal, landlord, mental health. Like every day, you just don't know what you're going to get into every day. And there's about 50 clients that we would see and support. So it's as varied as any other human's day, but it always is crisis based.
How'd you get into that?
Years ago, I went to I think I was a teenager, and I was looking for some work, and I'd heard about there was a camp. So that sounded interesting, specifically because it was out of the city, out of Toronto. It's been running for many, many years. It's called Shadow Lake Camp, and went up there for the summer, and it was just a great experience. It was a beautiful setting, had its own lake, 360 acres, and just absolutely stunning.
So you went as a counselor or as a camper?
This was working with clients that were with disabilities who were going up to camp. So I originally, first year, went up as a volunteer. And then next year went back up and got paid as a counselor, and did that for quite a few years. And I was pretty young then, didn't know what I was going to do. I'll do this while I'm trying to figure out what else to do, as a lot of us time tells us we need to get going. We can't just be sitting on the computer playing Tetris for the rest of our lives. Doesn't pay very well. Yeah.
Is there any particularly memorable patients or clients that you've had?
Oh my God. Yes.
I mean, is there any stories that you could share without violating confidentiality?
Oh, well, it wouldn't, definitely wouldn't violate. Oh my God. I mean, where do you start? Yeah, so I'll give you one. And this comes sort of with knowing the client. So I'm off for a weekend. I come back in on a Monday to give a client some medications in the morning. And let's say, we'll call him Ian. I go in and I say, hey, Ian, and I noticed that there's a book that wasn't there when I was there on Friday. So I say to him, what's going on? And he immediately says, how do you know? Get out of my head. What are you doing in there? So what I know about is that if there's something new, there's a reason. And I say to him, what is her name? He's like, how do you know? It's like, well, because it's always female and it's always a stripper. So the book that was new was a pharmaceutical guide that he picked up from the bookstore. Totally uncharacteristic. He has no interest in medications. So he breaks down and says, well, I was at the strip club and I was getting a lap dance and the stripper started to cry. So I asked her what's wrong. And she said that her kids were taken away from her because a doctor wrote a report and Children's Aid came and took away my kids. It's like, okay, so where does this book come in? So he says, well, I'm looking for the most poisonous medication because I'm going to kill him. I'm going to kill the doctor because that'll get me in good with the stripper. And maybe I don't have to pay for lap dances anymore. So one of the things I'm always big on is I never tell a client no. I let the situation tell him no. I could tell him, no, that's not a good idea. No, it's like, so I like to run through the scenario with them. I say, okay, so how's this going to work? It's like, well, what do you mean? It's like, okay, well, so let's say you find the most poisonous medication. Then what? It's like, okay, okay, well, let me help you. Do you know who the doctor is? No. Forget about that. Let's pretend you know who he is. Do you know where he lives? No. So, okay, let's forget about that. Let's pretend you've got the address. How are you going to get this most poisonous medication? It goes on and on and on. And it always goes to the situation where at the end it's like, okay, let's say you're with this doctor and you've got the medication. How are you going to convince a doctor to take the most poisonous medication on the planet? And his response to every situation for 15 years at the end is always, yeah, I guess I didn't think that one through. So the situation, running through that scenario allows the situation to say no rather than me. But don't want to be the bad guy.
It's kind of easy to see the parallel between that and the way that you said you were, taking jiu-jitsu. You're just going to take what someone gives you and kind of go with it.
Well, it's a conversation. I need to know how he got there. I could stop him from getting there by saying no, but in asking, it also gives me some answers into how he thinks, and so that gives me some ideas and what's the best, most dignified way to counter this, rather than just shutting him down and not validating his feelings. Like he's obviously got something going on if he's trying to kill a stripper. She obviously does a really good lap dance and he just wants to see her happy.
Yeah. Wow. Okay. Yeah. That's I don't know what I was expecting, but that's certainly a memorable story.
Yeah. There's many of those. There's a bookload.
I mean, that's fascinating. I mean, like you have, is this, I wouldn't say that this is like your daily intensity, but do these kinds of level of intensity things happen for you on a daily basis? Or, regular basis?
Yeah, when at work, it's common.
Yeah.
It's common. There's a lot of clients. There's a lot of administrative pressure, which is the most frustrating part of the job. I mean, I understand we have to justify our existence, but the fact that these clients are alive, it's pretty good justification. Or we can spend 90% of our time doing paperwork in triplicates to give it to 3 governing different agencies.
How do you deal with that kind of like regular intensity? Like, how do you decompress afterwards?
Well, I think the biggest thing is I don't absorb it.
Yeah.
Like I don't make it about me. I don't go home feeling like, oh, I did a great job about that. It's not about me. If you came in, I could show you a few variables, just like, some basic jiu-jitsu. You can show someone who has never done jiu-jitsu a few basic things, and it's going to work. So it's not about me. It's about for jiu-jitsu and coaching, I always say it's about the physics of the moment. That's what tells me whether it works or not. So I great that those physics work for me, whether it's an armbar or whether it's a counter I've put up in the way of a client who is escalating. But in the end, it's not about me, because you could do that too. So yeah, I don't. I mean, I like roller coasters, but roller coasters go up and they go down, and it's a fun ride. But yeah, if I get too highs or too high with that, then that implies I've got to get low with the lows. Because now if a client's low, I've got to go, oh well, I obviously didn't do enough. It's like, no, it's not about me. So yeah, I just don't absorb it, and the approach to is important, because that de-escalates rather than escalating, and that makes it easier. And the clients know, even if they're in a tough situation, they know I'm there to assist them, and they will often come back even after a crisis, and they've yelled and sweared and called me names and stuff like that, and that they'll apologize because they know I was just angry. I'm like, yeah, I know, it's okay. We're here. We hit the reset button. Whereas if I take a different approach, and you don't have to yell and scream, but, put them down or tell them that, well, you can't do that or this and that, then our next encounter is more challenging, because they will come back after the crisis knowing that, yes, I was in crisis, but you were also in crisis as a healthcare professional. You got angry at me at something that had nothing to do with you, and you got paid for it. When you put it in those terms, it's like, oh damn, yeah, that is true. I did escalate. So again, just recognizing those patterns, and it was never always like that. I mean, at the beginning, yeah, I got upset, and it's like, well, I thought I helped the person, and I did all this, and I spent all this time, but once realized, yeah, it wasn't about me. It actually made it a lot easier, and it was the same in jiu-jitsu. Once a position was stuck, it's not about me. It's about the physics of that moment. So that actually allows me to go backwards and figure out how to problem solve it. So for example, I'll often get people say, what's the counter to this at the club? And I can't remember the last time I've actually answered that question. When someone says, what's the counter? I will always go backwards and say, let's figure out where it failed. Because it's not magic. Something happened before this to allow this to happen. So if we go backwards and figure out where in that continuum it failed, that is actually the counter.
Yeah, it seems like you really picked up a lot of these patterns throughout the years that have like kind of helped you progress in ways where you're not trying to meet people with athleticism or youth or any of those other things that you lose over the years.
Yes, and that's an excellent point. Because I mean, I get the little injuries that people get, the fingers, a little tweak here or there, that kind of thing. But I'm not going in an explosive force meeting force manner, which is that's a pretty tough road to hoe, really.
Yeah.
And there's a lot of people at a lot of clubs that are injured because they're meeting force with force. And then once the other force goes, it's like now you don't have any counterability because you're at full extension and stuff snaps. And so even when I'm rolling, I can grapple for a long time, not get tired. And it's tiring, but not in the same manner. It's not a force meeting force manner. So no, that's a good point that you've picked up on. So stay relatively injury free, and people are saying, how do you do that? And it's like, well, I just don't do that, what you're doing.
I have a very similar style of rolling where I'm not, I rarely go above 40-50%, even when people are really going much, much higher.
Right. And how
stay relaxed.
And how do you manage that though? Because you can do your 40-50%, but people come at you at 100%.
I'd slow people down.
Right.
At my age, I'm not that old, but in my 40s, a lot of people are younger and faster. And my methodology is I need to connect to them so I can slow them down.
Absolutely.
Because if I try to go at their speed or their strength or their intensity, that's not a game I can win. But being slow, that's a game that's a game that we can play very effectively for me.
Right. Yeah.
And it gives me more time to think.
Yes. Yeah. I'm big on that as well. That connection, that you just said, that really resonates with me. So find that when people they'll get in a scramble. The connection allows me to monitor where things are going and when they're going. It doesn't mean I'm going to win that scramble or exchange, but that slowing down allows me to think, as opposed to, yeah, I passed that guy's guard, but I have no idea how I did it, because they're doing 95 things at once and they can't recreate that. They just got lucky, as opposed to that slow, methodical approach. There's the micro adjustments, like, oh, you just fired your calf muscle, didn't you? And it's like, okay, that's noted. That tells me that every time you fire your calf muscle, this is the next in the sequence that's going to happen. Thank you for that intel.
Yeah.
That doesn't happen in a mad, flying Baron Bolo scramble between two 14-year-olds that are hopped up on Dr. Pepper or something.
Yeah, I know that feeling. What role does jiu-jitsu play in your life now?
That's an interesting question. I mean, it occupies most of my life, most of my thoughts, as far as sort of how I perceive things, how I deal with pressure, and connection, those kind of things. It's starting to take over a bit more of my life. I'm starting to do less of the formalized counseling as far as mental health. For the last, well, since COVID, I've been doing a lot of counseling with just friends. People reach out online, stuff like that, and that's not a monetary thing. That's just a humanistic thing, as people are struggling, and
Yeah.
if we can chat or help, people will either text or they'll ask for a call, and absolutely, put that time aside. And so there's always that component, even on the mats. Started doing lunchtime classes at our club probably, I can't remember, like 7-8 years ago. We have a military base close by, and we had a lot of military people. A lot of them suffered with PTSD and, a lot of other afflictions, but specifically PTSD. And some of the larger class sizes didn't quite work for them, like a lot going on. They need the environment a little bit more quiet, a little bit more controlled, not as chaotic. And the approach is important too with each individual. So, not saying that we do have at our club, but you get some clubs that the approach is a bit more militaristic, like, get down and give me 20 push-ups if you didn't do it right. That's not going to resonate with someone. But providing a safe, comfortable space for people that, if we're in the middle of something and something triggers them and they just they have to walk away, it's like, I don't need to know what's going on, but the general rule is you just give me a thumbs up that lets me know you're okay, you're dealing with it, or a thumbs down, which means I need to come and we need to get you some help. And even just providing those, like that parameter will make a lot of people feel comfortable that there's a safe off ramp, which makes it comfortable for them to come and train, kind of thing. So, when you're saying sort of how does the jiu-jitsu play a role, like it's kind of everywhere, whether it's the physical or the mental side of it. Yeah, I mean, crisis, it's just a different kind of jiu-jitsu.
It's something that you said that I really love. Like, we at our club have been really trying to make it so that it's a more comfortable place to train, and that people know that the mat can be like a safe and healthy space. And
Absolutely.
I think a lot of places, at least, I've been to hundreds of gyms around the world, and I feel like there's often a level of like, just go after it. And I feel like one of the things that's so important to me about the culture at my gym is that we allow for you to show up however you are. And if you want to go hard, there's people who go hard. And if you're just learning, there's people who are there. And we try to make sure everyone knows to adjust with other folks. And so the fact that we have a very large queer community in Berlin, and there's a lot of queer folks at our gym, and that kind of safe space, I think, is very valuable for folks like that to be introduced to the sport in a healthy way. And I like that your approach to this is the mental health aspect of, like, we can make this more accessible for more people, and we can make the mat feel better for more people. And that to me is an incredible progression from what I remember in the earlier days of when my training, and probably you as well.
Yeah, and that speaks to, like, if you think of some of the basis of martial arts and the combat sports, it was based on protecting, your world, not giving away your secrets. You had to be tough and this and that, and then you combine that with, maybe some instructor that's got some control issues of their own. It's like, oh, this isn't going to go well, or someone who's not very accepting, or maybe they've got a brain injury on top of that and have problems with their own filter and anger management. It's like, yeah, it can be a pretty challenging environment. So keeping it safe, that's first. We hear that all the time at our club when people come in, that they feel comfortable right away. Everybody takes care of them. There's no meatheads. it's kind of like a dog park. I use these dog analogies a lot. I find it fascinating in a dog park. Like all the dogs are playing and having a great time, and then like one sort of dog comes in that's kind of aggressive, and all the other dogs kind of like gather around, and they're not really aggressive, but they're like, no, that's not what we do here. And then the other one goes, oh, okay. It's like, yeah, if you want to be aggressive, yeah, we got a Rottweiler over there who's not angry, and he's looking for someone to fight. So you just announce that, and we will gladly accommodate you. But
Yes, everyone mad enforcers.
yeah, you're not going to just come here and cherry pick on the vulnerable and the people you perceive as weak and shy, and it's like that's not going to happen. So that's important.
One of the things I wanted to make sure we talked about today was you had said to me you fostered 50 plus children over the years. I mean,
Yeah.
that's a pretty intense addition to the resume on top of crisis counseling and martial arts. Like how did you end up in that situation?
Well, first, the word intense is very close to the word insane in the dictionary. So I was just putting that out there right away. So that happened. The original job, it was a receiving assessment home. So we would take kids in. The agency would call up at any time of day or night and say, and they were all teenagers, so they had to be over 12 years old. They would say, we have a kid who's being brought into care. So my job was receive and assess, to take the kids in, assess what their needs were over a couple of weeks, and then go back to the agency and report so they could figure out which family within their agency, which style is best suited to matching these kids' needs. Kids never left. So they did so well with us that they never left. It was receiving assessment home by name, but we had kids that stayed for 5 years. Anytime kids left, it was because they were ready to move on rather than them being bumped around in the system. So that's kind of how that started.
And you did 50 in total, or over 50?
Yeah, it was over 50. I can't remember, but
I mean, that's very impressive.
Yeah, there were six at a time, and it was great, and it was the same kind of sort of philosophy and culture that we had, that I insist on the mats, and you'd mentioned it too about being a safe space, and that home had to be the place where you came when you thought you were in trouble. That was the place that you needed to be, because these kids were, they had some challenges, and all these kids' challenges were all justified. When you look at the case history, it's like, of course, this is where they ended up. Like, they didn't have a chance at it. Like, what else do you expect? So yeah, home had to be the place that when they screwed up at school or they got into trouble with the police, that this is where they wanted to be rather than running away from. So that was super important. And so much so we had, you'd mentioned about the queer community that you have there. We had our supervisor call up and said, well, we've got this one kid and we really want him to be with you, because I think he was about 15, but yeah, he wanted to transition into a woman, and there was no other home that they could see that they could put him in that was going to be supportive and ensure that he was that he was safe.
That's wonderful.
So they brought him in, and he was an amazing kid. He was quite funny, and I think a couple days after they brought him in, it was like just before the Gay Pride Day in Toronto, and he wanted to go. And he wanted to go as a woman, and he had money, but he wasn't going to take any of the money because it came from his father, who was not approving of his lifestyle. We'll just leave it at that. And he was never going to take another cent from this man in his life. So although his father had millions, he's like, nope. But he wanted to go as a woman. So, but he didn't have any money. And so I said, well, let's figure out what we can do. So, he went to the dollar store and he got a wig, and he really wanted boobs. It's like, so he bought some nylons. Like, well, we got rice at home. You can have boobs. So he went to the Pride Parade and he came back and he was so happy. But he was so happy because he grew 3 bra sizes in the parade because it rained and the rice expanded.
That's such a great story. That's so fantastic.
Yeah. So that's kind of how the fostering started, and that provided lots of stories. And the biggest thing with fostering for me was just the safety and the comfort. I love to cook, so I would cook easily starting at like 1:30, 2 o'clock every day. So it didn't matter how bad the day was. When you were coming in, it smelled like food, and we would always deal with any crisis because we had very good connections with the people at school, with their counselors and their teachers, and we always knew what was going on. But the deal was we always ate first.
So
We can
I
deal
want
with
to
anything after.
no, I want to ask about this because you also have you said you were you told me off camera that you were an avid cook, avid chef, and you have a jerk chicken sauce that you sell. Like, how did you get to do that? Was that from all of this cooking?
No, this actually predated that. I
Okay.
just always enjoyed cooking. When I was younger, I'd go to a restaurant and be like, "Oh my God, that's good." So I'd go home, look up a recipe or whatever, and try it. And of course, it would fail. So I was sort of fascinated again with that pattern recognition as to, so why is this place reproducing this en masse this good every single time, and not in a McDonald's kind of way? So there was something else that was going on. So yeah, just kind of the science of cooking. And once I learned out some of the science, it's like, yep, this works every time. So it was coming up to Christmas time, and we was looking at what are we going to do. So I decided I want to make, and I've done it pretty much every year since, like for many years now, make a Christmas gift, usually food related. So made up the jerk sauce, made it in a mason jar, just bought some material from like a cheap fabric store, cut it out, put it on top, printed out some labels. I don't know, made about 3 or 4 cases, and I gave it out to friends and family, and that was it. Didn't really think anything about it, and so that was December, and by end of January we started getting calls from people like, where did you buy that sauce? And I didn't buy it and made it. It's like, well, we need some more. It's like, well, as fun as it was to make it and give it out, it wasn't cheap. But so from that, the feedback was really good. So myself and my wife at the time, we decided let's try this. There's a market in Toronto called the St. Lawrence Market, and you could apply as a vendor, sort of outside, and have a little stall. So we were there for Saturday for 5 years, rain, sun, snow.
That's a fun market, actually. I've been to that a few times.
Yeah, it's a great place. So we're there for 5 years, giving out samples, got a really good customer base down there. And yeah, just kind of started from there. And it's, it's just a small side business. It's still going, but yeah, it's just a fun little thing that kind of progressed step by step.
I heard you used to have a very famous customer.
Oh, yes, rest her soul. Yes, Aretha Franklin. There's a store in Toronto. I'm pretty sure it is the most exclusive, the most expensive place to shop in Toronto. It's called Pusatiri's. Everybody knows about it. It's ridiculous. People will get up to the counter, and it's not uncommon for them to have like $1,800, $2,500 bill. Like it's ridiculous place. So yeah, I'll get there to Aretha in a second, but this is an interesting story. So we had I called them up because people kept saying, "Oh, you should get your sauce in this place, in this place." So I called them up, and I booked like an interview with them. The day that I came, to interview to see if we could have our product be in their store, there was a very large article that came out about us in the newspaper. So that was great timing because I brought that along, and they kind of said, "Oh yeah, no, sure, we'll give it a try, but we need you to do a demo." So we booked a demo for like 3 weeks down the road, and then I started hearing from all these other people when we were at the market, like, how did you get into Pusatiri's? Like nobody gets in there. It's like, again, ignorance. It's like, I don't know. I called them up. I asked them. They said, "Come on by." I went by, and they said yes. They're like,
Nobody told me I couldn't do the thing,
yeah,
so I did the
right.
thing.
I didn't know I couldn't do it, so I did it. Anyway, we're still in that store today. But there was one day we were coming and doing a delivery, and then the owner runs out and he's like, guess what? Guess what? It's like, yeah, like Aretha Franklin stopped by. So I don't know how she originally got the sauce, but they said whenever she's on tour and going through, like she buys it by the case kind of thing. So that was
That's
yeah,
amazing.
yeah, it was pretty cool.
So to kind of put all this together, you somehow over the years have done mental health counseling, crisis counseling, had fostered 50 plus children,
It sounds like
uh,
a lot when you say it.
and somehow you managed to spend that whole time and still keep jujitsu in your life as a hobby. And we didn't even talk about the photography that you had done as well at some point. You had mentioned that to me.
Oh,
So,
yeah,
like, how
yeah.
did you keep jujitsu in your life? Like, how did you keep that balance?
I don't know. I mean, it's yeah, it was just always there. I mean, there was a time when I moved from Toronto, and there wasn't really anything. And this again was in the early days where if you came across a blue belt, that was like a unicorn. Like, yeah, like, and that's sort of where I started with our club. That's why I joined up. Like there was a Henzo Gracie blue belt there. It's like, oh my God, are you kidding me? So, but there were times when there wasn't anything around, so I either had to travel or I would always just be interested. I would read books. It was back in the day, so when I was looking at instructionals, it wasn't BJJ Fanatics like I have now. It was trying to source out VHS tapes and either buying them or there was, one guy who was very good at buying them in the States and making copies and selling them to everyone for a good rate. But however I could get my hands on the material to keep my mind activated with it, because it was, no, it just fascinated me. So it wasn't something that seemed like it was work to do. And then the photography, same thing. It was always been interested in photography and did some photojournalism out this way and worked for some newspapers, did some freelance, and that's kind of transitioned well. So there's one of the this is the BJJ Globetrotters. Next year will be 10 years that I've been hanging out with those guys.
I think I'm about eight or nine at this point as well. I think my first one was in 2016.
Yeah, mine was 2015. So
Yeah.
next year's the 10th. So after my second camp after the first camp in 15, Christian, the guy who runs the camp, I saw a post of his I think it was from Germany, and there were some photos there, so I could see someone set up a photo booth. I thought that's a cool idea. So I reached out to him, especially for the camp in the States, because I can drive down. I said I'd love to set up a photo booth. Like I've got photo gear. Like I think that's a great idea. And he's super cool and super chill. And he said, yeah, sure, come and do that. So I did that for a couple of years. And then there was one year I was there, and his video guy who videos the classes so we can put them online for YouTube couldn't make it last minute. So I had my camera there, and I kind of said to him, well, I mean, I don't know what I'm doing, but I got a camera and I can push the button to record. And it's the most shakiest footage you've ever seen. But again, he's such a chill guy. His approach is really cool, because he invited me back to do it again, shoot some video. And he said, maybe look into what a gimbal is. So I'm like, gimbal? It's like, so you guys are subtle, dude, subtle. But I've been recording and traveling with them for quite a few years and recording a lot of their videos. So I've been invited to have been to Poland and Estonia, Faroe Islands. So that's been great. And then the last little while I've been invited as an instructor, which has been that's been pretty cool. So
That's a nice transition. I'm hoping to make that someday myself.
yeah, absolutely. Yeah, you'll enjoy it.
And just to kind of wrap this up, is there any piece of advice that you would like to leave? You kind of just wish everybody knew, as somebody who is a black belt long in the sport and not having it be your primary thing.
Like advice in terms of like jiu-jitsu or
whatever you feel that you hope everyone would know.
That's a big one. There's a lot. Understand your dog. Yeah, if you can kind of look at people as dogs a little bit. So when there's that person next to you in the supermarket that is in the lineup and you're like, oh, what an asshole that person is. Or maybe if you're starting to feel an emotion about something when it comes to somebody else, you're reflecting your emotions rather than what the other person is doing. So yes, they may be completely doing something wrong, but we have the ability to either respond or react. The anger is the reaction and tells us how we feel about things based on our own upbringing, our own situation, what's happened to us. The response invites kind of reflection and contemplation from the other person to say, like, how did you arrive at where you are? Which I realize seems like a lot more work because people feel like that's going to open up a conversation that I'm not willing to have that. I'd rather just call him a dick.
That is the easy way out sometimes.
Well, it seems like that. However, it's actually not. And it doesn't take that long. Like sometimes it's a 1 minute thing. Some people just need to hear a validation. They don't need you to counsel their whole life. They just need to know that there's a decent human out there that I didn't even know at the bus stop, but you know, he cared for a second to say, hey, like, are you all right? And it's like, yeah, actually, I am. I'm going to be okay, thanks. As opposed to, there's another jerk who's just looking to pile on the shit that I've got going on today and that kind of thing. So,
yeah, I think we could use a little more love in the world.
Yeah, just some compassion and take a step back. And again, same as on the mat, off the mat. Yeah, don't make it about yourself because it's not.
Yep.
Yeah.
Is there anything you'd like to promote or some way that people can find you?
Yeah, we'll get it. We'll get some stuff in the show notes.
Okay.
I'm going to be doing some seminars. I've got a few booked next year. I'm away for about a month or 5 weeks in Europe, teaching next year in, going to be going to Faroe Islands, Estonia, Czech Republic, going down to, where am I going down to? Mexico in April. So there's a few things going on, and looking to be doing some seminars with people, and doing it in this kind of way that's a slightly different. It's blending the mental health with, not the mental health, but the mental side with the physical side. I think it was Dean Lister, but I think it was popularized by John Danaher. John Danaher with leg locks said, you know, why would you ignore 50% of the body? But I believe that was Dean Lister's saying. So stealing from that, I would say, why would you ignore 100% of the mind? And I find that that's what a lot of people do in jiu-jitsu. It's about the physical. And there's some other aspects going on there that you can put into your game, which actually makes it very difficult to counter because it's not based on a physical thing that people can pick up on. It's about that pattern recognition and the absence of pressure. Got one question for you. I always ask to people, if you were going in an MMA fight, what would be your walkout song?
Oh, that's a great question. Let me think about that for a second.
Okay, I know, put you on the spot there.
Yeah. What would be my walkout song?
What would be your walkout genre? Let's start with that.
You know, it'd probably be something 80s music.
Okay. Would it be metal?
No,
pop,
it would probably
funk,
be
ska.
Probably be something Madonna related. I don't know. I'm just a
Okay.
huge 80s fan. Anybody who comes to any of my classes, like, I always have 80s music going in the background. And
so you'd come out to Material Girl is what you're telling me.
I mean, maybe it's not really who I am, but I love the music, and I'm always dancing during class when there's 80s music going on in the background. So I don't have a good answer for what the song would be, but it would almost certainly be something like 80s pop music was just, I don't know, it's just my jam.
That's awesome. Okay.
Tommy, thank you so much for your time today. I really appreciate it. And this was a great conversation.
Well, I appreciate it. Thanks for having me on, and I hope to talk to you in the future and maybe get over to your side of the world.
Yep. Thank you.
All right. Take care.
I hope you enjoyed listening to our conversation. At the end, Tom asked me about walkout music for an MMA fight. After some thought, I'd probably walk out to Higher Love by Steve Winwood. It's definitely in line with the 80s theme. Even though I'm not religious, I still think we can use a little more love in the world. As for the name Crash Test Tommy, it came from sharing a gif of crash test dummies doing their job on Facebook. Crash test dummies are used by car companies to retain information in the event of an accident about what worked and what didn't. And that's a little bit like how Tom thinks of jiu-jitsu. Also, Crash Test Tommy and Crash Test Dummy sound close enough that the name just kind of ended up sticking. If you ever find yourself near Belleville, Canada and want to train with Tommy, reach out to him on Facebook. If you want to order the jerk sauce, you can find the link in the show notes. If you want to have Tommy come through and teach a seminar focused on the mental side of BJJ, find him on Facebook at the link in the show notes. And as always, thanks for your time and attention.